Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast. I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Barbara Arrowsmith-Young. Barbara, excited to have you on the show.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm thrilled to have you as well too. You're doing phenomenal things, and what I wanted to do is just read a little bit more about some of those phenomenal things, so you can hear a little bit more about Barbara, an innovator and an author in the field of neuroeducation. Barbara's work utilizing the principles of neuroplasticity is used worldwide to enhance cognitive functioning. Her vision is to put the brain in the education equation. Her work began in 1978, is recognized as one of the first examples of the practical application of neuroplasticity to address learning difficulties, and its application has expanded to address those dealing with traumatic brain injury, addiction, cognitive decline with aging, and those who want to enhance performance. Her journey and work is documented in her best-selling book, The Woman Who Changed Her Brain, and in her TEDx talk. As the director of the Aerosmith program, Barbara continues to engage in research to understand how we can drive neuroplastic change in the brain to benefit learners of all ages. Barbara, excited to have you on the show. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that you have to listen to her TEDx talk and how powerful transformation is. I think so many times we can get stuck in this is how our brains work, this is how our lives work. But I love more than anything else, I think that your story is phenomenal and that you've been able to remind us of how important transformation and change is and how it's definitely possible. And I had to pull two quotes that you said your dad reminded you of, which is if there's a problem and there's no solution, you have to go out and create that solution. And another thing he said, before you solve a problem, you have to understand its nature. So absolutely love all the awesome things you're doing, Barbara. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I am. I'm really pumped. I'm really charged to
Yeah.
speak to the community. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm pumped as well too. And so I know I touched a little bit on your bio and your story. Could you take us through what I call your CEO story? We'll let you get started with all the awesome work you're doing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think probably my CEO story started at birth. If one believes in, I don't know, destiny or fate, I mean, obviously one has free will as well. But having been born with very, very significant learning difficulties, that really set me on my path. When you're on an airplane and they say, if there's a problem, the lights will show up on the floor and guide you to safety. Well, I feel like, from birth, I had those lights guiding me to create this work.
Mhm.
So it was both nature and nurture. The nature was being born with a brain that was, not functioning in certain ways as it was designed to. And then the nurture was having my parents, my father, who was an inventor and a scientist and had those beliefs that you talked about. And the other piece of wisdom that he gave me said, if the rest of the world tells you you can't do it, he said, don't listen. He said, this is how science goes forward. So I had, my father setting me on a quest to find a solution to the difficulties I was born with. And my mother was an educator, and she believed in being of service. Like this was her big sort of contribution of, taking your gifts and being of service in the world. So I feel like, yes, my journey started very, very early. And then my schooling was a struggle all the way through school. It was never easy because of the learning difficulties, and also it was at a time when there wasn't even understanding of learning difficulties because I started my schooling, in the mid to late 1950s. So the term hadn't even been identified. So I experienced a lot of struggle, but with that message from both of my parents of being of service and finding a solution. So I feel like I was set on a quest to create this work, and it was very intentional. So I feel like everything I did, from the courses I picked in university, child development, to try to understand really what was wrong with me, and then school psychology, doing my master's degree, really to try to understand the nature of my challenges, then understand what I could do about that, and coming across lines of research that I put together. And then when I saw the changes, saying, it's not sufficient that I benefited, I need to take this out into the world and find a way to have others benefit. And that's the origin of this work. So it's really very intentional, very purpose driven, very visionary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like at the heart of entrepreneurship, especially, it's about solving problems. And I love, your dad and obviously you and just how that has exploded itself into like all the awesome work that you're doing. And I don't know if you ever heard the Steve Jobs commencement speech where he talks about like a lot of times you didn't know things would happen to your life till you started to connect the dots looking backwards. And that
Mm,
kind of reminded me of that, like even reading your book, how you read the book, the man with that shattered the world, I believe,
yes.
and how all those things aligned. And it just kind of really puts you in the spot where, when you were in that spot, it sounds like in your life and you're having those struggles, you were able to kind of lean back on the things that, your dad had taught you, lean back on the schooling. It just all these things started to combine to where you started to be armed with the ability to, like you said, be able to solve that for yourself, but also be able to solve that for so many other people.
Yeah, and I think it's for me, it's there was always the intention. Like, so I think intention is really important. So the my intention was to find a solution. So it was being open to all the opportunities that came my way to support that intention, right? It's what was that quote about, opportunity favors a prepared mind.
Yes.
So it wasn't happenstance. Like I had this goal, this vision, this intention, and then open kind of the field or the space to all the opportunities that showed up, like the person handing me that book I mean, I remember it was August of 1977. I mean, it really stands out in my mind,
Mhm.
The Man with the Shattered World, which changed my life. But if I hadn't had the intention to create the solution, I might have just put the book down, or I might have not accepted it, right? I think it's, being clear on one's intention and then having that open mindset to seeing all the opportunities or possibilities that are out there in the world to support your intention.
Yeah, I appreciate you, talking about that and how powerful that is because, when you have that intention, I don't know if you feel like in much of the same word, purpose as well, too, those
Mm,
intention and purpose together, you start to have those experiences that you go through in life and they seem to like, for lack of a better term, arm you or prepare you or end up being like kind of instruments that you can use to be able to fulfill that intention and fulfill that purpose and all of those things. So it's kind of sound like you may have had that experience.
absolutely. So I would agree. Purpose. Like I think somebody asked me to describe my organization. We're visionary and purpose driven. Like anybody that comes to the work is driven by a purpose of wanting at sort of a really fundamental level making the world a better place. I mean, it sounds kind of trite, but that is fundamentally what drives us because with cognitive enhancement, we open possibilities for humanity, like for individuals if they're struggling with learning difficulties. If we change their brain, all sorts of doors open that weren't open before. We work with people with addiction, that opens all sorts of possibilities to, a different trajectory in their life. People with traumatic brain injury, and just regular individuals, like anybody can enhance cognition. You mentioned that it's very positive. I mean, when I started schooling, I was told the brain was fixed, right? Like our brain, basically, if you have a difficulty, accept it, learn to live within your limitations, and that's as good as it gets. And now we know that's not the case. Like, and it's so hopeful and optimistic and powerful that this organ that we carry with us, our brain, that filters our perceptions and our understanding of ourselves, of other people, of our world, our relationship to it, is changeable. Like, so we can, um, if we're not good at something, it doesn't mean that we have to accept that we're not good at that. We can actually enhance our brain and be good at what we weren't before. I mean, to me, it's, I think about if I have a gift to leave to the world and a legacy, and that's, also part of entrepreneurship is, why are we doing what we're doing? I mean, for me, it's leaving a legacy and a gift to the world uh, in this work. Long after I'm gone, I'm very hopeful, and I'm setting up structures and foundations to, keep this work going. So yeah, I think it's purpose driven, it's visionary, very innovative. Because when I created this work, that comment that my father made about don't listen to conventional wisdom because they're going to tell you you can't do it because it's not been done before. And certainly I was told multiple times, this is not possible, you can't do this. And I thought, well, maybe I can't, but I'm going to try. And I found actually I could. So I think, a lot of entrepreneurship is taking risks. You're often carving a path that hasn't been carved before, and you have to have sort of courage and conviction that you're going to step off the trail and blaze your own trail, and be okay with that uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I love, everything that you all do because, even as I read in your book and, as I was going through it, just and heard it in your tech talk, just like how people said that, this is how the brain works, this is how the world works. And you were able to kind of blaze that trail. And I'm sure it wasn't always, it's great when you're able to blaze the trail and look back and see that, okay, this is the trail that I blazed. But I'm sure going through it at the time, when you hear those things, it can be very disheartening. So that's why I love, again, like your father and just your mother and the impact of all those experience had on being able to I guess arm you with that ability to blaze that trail, to do all the awesome work. Because now, we start to see and understand that you can make those changes, that you aren't static and you have to be in that specific place or think that specific way or have these limitations. You start to be limitless and you start to be armed with the ability to be the change that you want to see in the world, be great at what things are. All those things start to be a little bit more in our hands to be able to kind of make that impact.
I think absolutely, and I think having a growth mindset, being open to possibilities. And one of the big things that has supported me is always question assumptions, right? Like
Mm,
I'm really good at making assumptions, but I always think, okay, is that really true? Like,
right.
I like to question it because I think, for innovation to go forward, you have to really have to question assumptions, right? You can't necessarily accept again what's out there conventionally, and you have to be open to making different combinations, seeing possibilities where maybe other people don't see those possibilities, and also you have to be able to accept failure, right? Because I mean, there were a number of times where I had a hypothesis of creating a cognitive program, thinking, okay, this is going to work. Um, based on the research and my understanding, and it ended up in the waste paper basket.
Mm,
But I learned something from that, and then I didn't give up. I went out and tried again. So I think that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit as well, as being willing to take risks, being willing to fail, being resilient, being persistent. And questioning assumptions, being open, open to possibilities, and um, there's this quote, going beyond the information given. Like you have to be able to, see what information is there in front of you, but be open to taking a leap beyond that, kind of almost into the uncertainty or into the void, and exploring that territory, which certainly for me is many times been very uncomfortable. But that's often been, where the real fertile soil has been. So it's I'm always in awe of entrepreneurship, right? And sometimes I joke that I became an entrepreneur because nobody would hire me. you know so I had to create my own my own company and my own work. But it's taking that leap into the unknown, and it's kind of it's having courage in one's convictions as well. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, and I think that a lot of times if we look around at all the innovations and things that we use on a daily basis, there was once a time where somebody said that that was impossible, that can't happen, and but we now are using, leveraging things on a daily basis that were once quote unquote impossible. So that's why I love again all the awesome work that you all are doing, and of course like the innovation and transformation that you had in your life, and of course in so many others. So I want to drill down a little bit more, hear a little bit more on how you're serving the clients that you work with. I know you mentioned a little bit about your mission and that purpose, but could you take us through a little bit more on what that looks like and how you're making that impact?
Yeah, so it's started with listening very deeply to the needs of the clients that we're working with, right? It's again like not making an assumption that I think I know what they need, and then extending the what we were offering to meet those needs, right? I mean, fundamentally, our what we offer, our secret sauce, is changing the brain, and changing the brain in multiple cognitive functions. I created programs. I had multiple learning difficulties, so I couldn't just create one program. I created 3 different programs for 3 different parts of my brain, saw the transformation, and now we have programs for 19 different regions. So again, it's been listening to people would walk through the door, of my first office here in Toronto in Canada, and they wouldn't have the same difficulties I had, right? So I had to listen very deeply as they described the challenges that they were experiencing in their lives. I go back into the neuroscience literature, do a lot of reading, trying to figure out, okay, is what they're describing this part of the brain? Is it this cognitive function? Then come back to them, continue the conversation, then try to create something that I think would stimulate that cognitive function. So it's really, if you understand the nature of the part of the brain or the function that it does, you can create an activity or a task that works it. Just like if you're going to physiotherapy and you have a very specific muscle group that's injured, you're going to be exercising that muscle group or the muscles around it. So it's identifying the cognitive function, creating a task, and then applying it to see, is it actually improving that part of the brain or that functioning. And that's where sometimes things ended up in the garbage pail because they didn't do what I thought. But it really started with being grounded in science, but deeply listening to the clients' experiences, their needs. And I describe it almost like a series of naturalistic experiments. It was really exciting because it was very innovative, very creative. And over time, that led to the creation of the 19 programs. And I'm very clear that the brain is more complex than that. There are more regions, but we have programs to address things like thinking, reasoning, planning, problem solving, spatial ability, mechanical reasoning, auditory memory, visual memory, face recognition, all sorts of really critical functions that we can take the person from where they're currently holding, whether it's a difficulty or average functioning or even above average functioning, and we can enhance that and strengthen it and improve it. And then I started thinking, okay, we have this set of exercises. We're applying it currently to students that are struggling with learning challenges. Can I expand that beyond just individuals? I mean, not just, I was one of those individuals with learning difficulties. So started thinking, okay, what are other applications, given our brain is central to everything we do? So then started working with some individuals with traumatic brain injury and seeing very similar changes. We do imaging research. We work with universities to do research because I'm very solid around evidence base, that we make a hypothesis that the brain is changing, but we actually need to look into the brain with fMRIs to see, and yes, it is changing, and we see similar patterns if you have a learning difficulty or if you have acquired brain injury. There's a similar patterns of underconnectivity and hyperconnectivity, and as the individual goes through the program, those underconnected areas start to strengthen in their connectivity, which then frees up energy in the brain to become creative and function much more effectively. So it was then going out and exploring, what other applications are there. So we started with people with acquired or traumatic brain injury. We started then looking at individuals just in regular classrooms, mainstream classrooms, because you go to school to learn. You learn with your brain. Well, let's enhance the brain, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense that the vehicle that's allowing us to learn, why don't we put that into the education equation? So we have programs now in schools in multiple countries where 30 minutes a day, kids in grade 1 or grade 2 or grade 3 are working on their brain as well as working on curriculum. And then I always my heart is with the people that are going to be marginalized in one way or another, so whether you have a learning difficulty. So then I got really interested in addiction, because we know addiction rewires the brain in a not very constructive or positive way. So we did a study in Australia, in Queensland, with a group called Teen Challenge. So I'm always looking for opportunities to extend the reach of the application of the work. And we saw really, really positive benefits. So we're continuing to work with that population. As I'm getting older and my brain is slowing down a little bit, that's the whole application to keep our brain sharp as we age. So again, it's really, for me, it's seeing possibilities. It's going out there. You've got a product, and what are the range of possibilities where that product will add value, to the world. And for me, our product is cognitive enhancement, changing the brain, and then looking at what are all the different applications.
I love that, and I love it so much. Just in hearing and knowing your story as well too, and how it started with the journey of you being able to kind of work on it, and how it just is blossomed. You start to realize that how powerful the brain is, and how applicable it is in so many different scenarios for so many different people. And I love that you're on this quest, and I would probably say nonstop quest of really being able to solve that and creating that legacy, as you mentioned. But I absolutely love that, and I don't know, the word that I wrote down was actually compounding, because it almost sounds like as you start to strengthen, or I don't know if heal is the right word, but basically as you start to work on your brain, it starts to have a compounding effect in so many
Mhm.
different areas, it seems.
It really does. I mean, in another area, we're just working with someone that has an executive coaching business in actually Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates,
Mhm.
and he's taking this work out to leaders and executive coaches because in that area, the better you can process information, the more you can see connections, the more insight, the faster your processing is, and we can enhance that, right? So I'm really excited about that opportunity. Like if we can make leaders more effective as leaders, I think that's wonderful. I mean, I was part of the Vistage, the tech like entrepreneur group, and we'd often have people come in and do presentations on assessment measures to look at, where you are as a CEO or an owner of a business, but they were always assuming that we were fixed, right? So if I was not good in certain area, then the idea was my company should not ask me to go into that area. And I kept saying, well, no, we can actually change the brain so that person can be good in that area. Like to me, it's so powerful. It like it removes limitations, and it allows us to grow, to develop, to explore new territory. Like that's to me, I maybe can hear I love my work, and I figure I'm never retiring, and that a lot of CEOs or entrepreneurs don't, because there's just always possibilities of new horizons, new territory, uh, new applications. So I just so that's one that I'm really really excited about, is affecting leadership and leaders in a positive direction. And one of the things we see change also, you talked about the compounding impact, is emotional intelligence changes as the brain changes, because our brain helps us understand our emotions and attach meaning to our emotions. Perspective taking, our brain allows us to put ourselves into somebody else's shoes to try to understand their experience, which leads to compassion. We see empathy improve. Like I just feel this is so um, has so much potential to be positive for the challenges that we are facing in our world today.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. Like that phrase that you said that really stuck with me when you said it frees up the mind. And I think that as you start to develop and work on all those different aspects, then it starts to free it up so you can be more creative. You can, be a better leader. You can work, have more awareness maybe around, other
Mhm.
people's emotions, have that empathy. So many different, positive impacts of the work that you do. So I truly, appreciate, all of that. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have. But what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
Yeah, I'd say there are a couple things. I mean, I read many, many years ago that book E-Myth,
Mhm.
which had a huge, oh my gosh, that was like uh, had a huge impact on me, because I thought, okay, because at that point I was doing everything right, and I thought, okay, if I want this work to scale, and I have to leverage myself, right? I have to create an organization, that people can do, that I'm replaceable, right? Like, so that was, um, I would say any entrepreneur starting out, I know it's, an older book, but it's very, very powerful. So I would recommend that. And the other thing for me is creating what I call drift time, or big picture time. For me, it's gardening. Some people it might be meditation. Some people might be going for a walk. I need time where any problem that I'm dealing with, I park it in the back of my brain. And I go out and for me, I garden. And just being, out there, it's very meditative. And I'm just at one with nature and with whatever I'm doing in the garden. And what I often find is, unbeknownst to me, that problem gets solved because something is happening in that drift time, that big picture time. And the solution is much better than if I'd spent 2 or 3 hours thinking about the problem. So I I can't function without what I call that drift time. So I would encourage any entrepreneur to create space in their day, to just have that drift time, or that open. I don't know what else to call it. Dream time, maybe in the Aboriginal uh, language, but I find it, I couldn't function without it. So those are my two um, recommendations. And I guess the third one, I know you only asked for one,
Go for
um,
it.
is creating an environment, in your organization where everybody feels safe and everybody feels that all voices are welcome, right? Because I don't care if it's my receptionist, like, it doesn't matter who it is. I even had a handyman once that, would come in and got, passionate about our work and contributed thoughts and ideas. So it's really, um, creating a safe space where everyone's thoughts and ideas are welcome, because it's not all up to me, right, to come up with the ideas. And sometimes someone will come up with a better idea than I had, and it doesn't matter who that is in the organization. But there has to be a safe space where people feel that they can contribute and that it's welcome and it's not going to be judged.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think it's so powerful to create that environment and the culture even that allows that, because I think that's when you start to really, we always think that, a great idea or a great impact or whatever happens because one person thinks it up and then they start to execute it and, it goes on from there. But I think a lot of times when you have iron sharpened iron, where you have those really sometimes different perspectives that come and you're like, I never thought about it from that vantage point, and you start to get that to like propel itself into something really impactful. But it only happens if you have that fertile soil. I'll go back to that, where you've
Mm.
created that within your organization. And I love the phrase drift time. I actually want to borrow that from you. You can call them many things. I love the drift time just because I think that in order to, you hear a lot of times like really great ideas came to me when I was in the shower, is because we have that, I guess, intentionality of like what we wanted to try to solve. We didn't continue to think about it, work on it, work on it, work on it. We stepped away, and then the solution ends up coming because it is kind of, I guess, I don't know how it works technically, but it is something that's with our intention, but we're away from it, and that's where those opportunities come. And of course, I love the E-Myth. I think it's an oldie but goodie, and it's always tried and true, because so many times into entrepreneurship and business, we don't sometimes realize exactly what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah, yeah. And I just, going back to that drift time, it's a default mode network in the brain. That's what gets triggered in that drift time. If
Okay.
somebody's interested in reading about that, and that is that big picture thinking, blue sky thinking, very creative. So that's what gets triggered. When I go out and garden, or some people in the shower, you go for a walk in nature, right? And that's a very generative, creative place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I'm going to add in another hack, or maybe this is going to be a nugget, is if you don't know something, make sure you know people that do know. And that's why I'm super excited to be talking with you. So now I know exactly like what that is. So you hear me reference that in the future, that came from, me learning from Barbara. So, I want to ask you now for what I call a CEO nugget. This is a little bit more word of wisdom or piece of advice. It could be something that you might tell a client, something from your book, or if you were to hop into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
Yeah. It's a really interesting question. I think it's for me, be stay true to your purpose. I think that's really important because or stick to your knitting, like that's an old expression. There are lots of times where I've had people come to me and say, oh, what about this over here? And I mean, I'm not suggesting that it isn't interesting, but it's not aligned with the purpose of the organization, and it would be a distraction, and take us down a different path that isn't really our purpose or our intention. So yeah, I've learned, and maybe there are a couple times where I have been distracted and started down that path, and then it's not been where we need to go. So I think it's, yeah, really be clear on your purpose and aligned with your purpose, and kind of evaluate everything that comes your way. Uh, you know, is it aligned or is it not? And then, do I want to really go into a different business, or am I wanting to really stick with what my purpose is?
Yeah, I love that, and especially because it can end up being a filter that allows you to know if you are, if you should even try or pursue or invest more time or resources into something if it's not true to your purpose, not true to your knitting or any of those things that you're doing. Because if you have that filter, you understand this is what we stand for, this is what we're all about, and this is how we're going to make it happen. Anytime you have an idea, or sometimes if you have a different shiny object that you might want to lean into, you could say, okay, is this true to like why we're created, our purpose, our mission, our vision, all of those things? And that allows you to be kind of like a magnet and back into the things that are moving that mission forward.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, what would you consider to be your answer to my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO? My goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So, Barbara, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Oh, um, I think I would go back to what I said earlier. I mean, to me, being a CEO is creating a safe container where all voices are welcome, that we're co-creating together, again aligned with whatever the purpose is of the organization, but creating that, like my role I see is creating that safe container where ideas can come forward, get incubated and developed, that are aligned with our purpose.
I love, love, love that. And that co-creation word is so powerful because I think it also to me speaks into, like we talked about our experiences, our journeys, how that ends up being like our superpower, but also other people have their experience, journey, skills, abilities that are their superpowers too, but only through co-creation can that be in that container and really blossom into something really phenomenal. So I love how powerful that is, and how it's kind of upon definitely the CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners, but I think it's ultimately upon all of us to make sure that we are I guess cultivating an opportunity to have that co-creation so that as a world and as people we get to be better and better.
Yes, you said it very well.
There you go. I got it from you, so you made it even easier. So thank you so much for that co-creation opportunity, Barbara. And of course, I appreciate your time even more. So what I want to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know, and of course, how best they can get a hold of you, your team, get a copy of your book, find about all the awesome things you're doing, and of course, listen to that TEDx talk.
Yeah, so everything is on our website. It's Arrowsmith, which is my middle name, arrowsmith.ca. And just a little aside, I mean, I took Arrowsmith was my father's mother's maiden name, and she was a pioneer. So, I'm honored that I have that name and I put that name to the work. But yeah, arrowsmith.ca. There's a wealth of resources. We've got webinars on the brain if you're interested in understanding, how the brain shapes us and how we can shape it. There's lots and lots of webinars, lots of research. There's lots of material. You access the book. We have a couple of free downloadable books that are called The Brain Pioneer and Brain School, by an author, Howard Eaton, who's written on this work. Just there's a wealth of information and how to contact us as well. So, and if there are people listening out there that are curious about how can you enhance your own brain, or bring it into your organization, we love to have conversations to explore that possibility.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. To make it even easier, we're gonna have the links and information in the show notes as well too. But I obviously love the work that you do. Huge fan for so many different reasons. But I love that you kind of talked about that piece around legacy, and when we were talking about legacy, I love the company name Mrs. Aerosmith and how that has continued on. I love the work that you're doing, and it's so beautiful when we sometimes forget that the thing that we're doing isn't just for us at that time. A lot of times it's for generation upon generation and really changing and having transformation in the world. So thank you so much for embodying that. Of course, your time today. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to have this conversation. It's been delightful. Thank you.
Absolutely.